Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to the January meetup for the Architecture Fringe 2021. Thank you so much for all being here. It's nice to see so many of you, some familiar faces, some new ones as well. So for you that have already joined us before and you're familiar with the Architecture Fringe, welcome back. Very nice to see you again. If it's the first time you're joining us, a very warm welcome. It's so nice to have new people join these meetups. Basically, we are an architectural festival going since 2016 with a festival each year. And we just started our biannual model, actually. These meetups are basically for everyone and it's a vital part for the Architecture Fringe program because it's a chance for everyone to meet, to share ideas, to understand what they want to do, and basically it's basically to explore what they want to do. Usually when we didn't have to do this online, we meet usually in Edinburgh or Glasgow or even Inverness, but you understand under these circumstances, it's everything online. So yes, it's very nice that you're here and we can share these nights, these evenings. So I want to welcome you. My name is Matthew Imperopoulos. I'm a co-producer of the Architecture Fringe. Here are my colleagues, Neil Maguire, Andy Summers, Louisa Butler, Reina Armstrong, and Shana Common. Tonight we are also joined by Mary Vaughan Johnson. We are very excited about it. We're very excited about her provocation talk, and we're looking forward for it. So to outline tonight's event, basically we are going to have the talk, and afterwards we're going to be in some breakout rooms that will be facilitated by the Architecture Fringe team, where we can discuss some of your ideas. Tonight, especially, maybe the time will be a bit short, but still we'll have time to discuss your ideas. And at the very end, we will have some social time to interact, and you're welcome to join us, and we'll be happy if you do. So generally in the meetups, we try to, before everything begins, we try to break in some smaller rooms, just for a briefly, 3 minutes overall, to meet and introduce ourselves to new people and get to know each other a little bit more. So I think Reina is going to do that just now.
Okay, so I think everybody's back. So I'll give an introduction to Mary and our theme for this year. So this year, the Architecture Fringe invites you to unlearn with us, or to interrogate our own behaviours, beliefs and biases in order to acknowledge how the world really is, and then to reimagine how it could be. And central to this is the idea of whiteness. So talking about this, primary audience to address is white people. And it's vital that we understand that we can't step aside in this conversation, and we have to take responsibility and action to dismantle the systems of oppression that we directly benefit from, and not lean on people of colour to do the work. So we're delighted to have Mary Vaughan Johnson joining us to deliver a short provocation in response to our theme of unlearning, entitled Whiteness in Architecture. There'll be an opportunity for 5 to 10 minutes of questions at the end of the presentation, so send them into the chat at the side of Zoom, and we'll pick out some of these and we'll invite you to ask the question yourself at the end. And just on a side note, if everyone can mute themselves when the talk is going on. So Mary has been head of architecture and landscape at Kingston School of Art in London since 2018. Before that, she was chief docent and curator of the Maison de Verre in Paris for 9 years. Funded by the Association de Maison de Verre, her research explores private and public spheres in architecture. She's made presentations about and published this work globally. In Paris, she also co-founded and was resident program director for the Catholic University of America's School of Architecture and Studies Abroad, and practiced as an architect for a number of years in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Florida. So I'll hand over to you, Mary.
Should unmute myself first. Hello, everyone, and just like to take the opportunity to thank Architecture Fringe for inviting me to this platform and to give me the opportunity to talk about something I'm quite passionate about, but have not had such a platform. So it's the first time I've been given a platform to talk about this, so I really appreciate the opportunity. I thought I would start, and I'm going to go ahead and show my first slide. So bear with me for a second. Hope everyone can see that. So I thought I'd start by, first of all, the word provoke and provocation. I thought, I like to talk about words, and provoke is a word that comes from Latin provocare, which is really to bring forth or to call forth. And its meaning is to stimulate action. And this is what I quite like about the word. So it's not about so much, tonight we'll be having conversation, but it's really to stimulate an action. And I think I'd like for you to keep that in mind with this provocation today. And I wanted to start with just this slide to give quotes and information that I'm sure I don't need to. I think we're all aware that the profession of architecture and the discipline is, first of all, as a discipline, architecture is a Western construct. And I mean the term itself, architecture, and how it developed as a discipline that has imposed its presence worldwide and has always been predominantly well, first started by white male and still continues to be dominated by white male. And so I think rather than focus on that today, I thought it would be important to focus on whiteness, and then we can talk about its relationship with architecture. So to do that, I thought I'd show 3 videos. And if let's go to the next slide here. The 3 videos, the first one talks about racism is a white problem. And the second focuses on what is white fragility, the concept of white fragility. And then the third one is a quote from the author: white supremacist, delusional amnesia is going to get us all killed. Now, these films do focus on North America, which is where I spend most of my life, but it is not a new topic globally. So this is something that is impacting everywhere. So it's not something only happening in the US. I just want to emphasize that. So we'll start with the first video. Let's try to go back. And the last one. And I was just going to end with this last slide, which is coming from Slow Factory. It's a nonprofit organization, and thought I would end the provocation with this column of the levels of whiteness, and maybe each of you consider where, you know, people who are white like me, consider where we might belong on that column, on that different levels. And now I'll stop sharing. I don't know if it's too soon. Yeah, we can stop sharing. Yeah. So I'm happy for us to start with questions.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for responding with a provocation. Nobody's put anything in the chat, but does anybody want to ask anything themselves just now? Well, I guess I have a question. So, yeah, what steps have been taken to address the systems that favour whiteness at Kingston, where you're teaching just now? Particularly interested in your approach to positive discrimination situations when that happens.
It's a tougher question than you realize. It's what I've been struggling with from the beginning. So one of the first things that I did when I started my post, which was 2.5 years ago, is I invited an organization called Shades of Noir to work with the staff. And this was, they were brilliant. I mean, it's a great organization. The dilemma is that oftentimes what happens when you create a space to it's an uncomfortable space, right? And maybe I should have warned everybody before I showed the videos that this is going to be very uncomfortable. But I also believe that, and we know this as creative people, that part of the process of creation, when you're is about entering into the unknown. It's about the willingness to enter into an area that you don't know anything about. And it can be very uncomfortable when you're provoked in that space, like what the videos I've shown you. So what tends to happen when I organize this is that most of the staff who came, because it was not made mandatory, the staff who, of course, were ready or were in that place where they wanted to make a difference or they wanted to understand. But it was a very small percentage out of the whole group. So I had to, in fact, because we spent quite a bit of money on it, so I had to open it up to the rest of the schools, so invite photography and fine arts and the design school as well, because we couldn't get enough people to enter that space. So it's a challenge. So with that, I think the thing that the thing that will be the actions that are speaking louder, let's put it that way, I think, and it has a lot to do with why I'm here today, I think, is that we, Nana Biamo Fosu, who's here in the room, and Bushra Mohammed came to me to propose a studio that they wanted to teach. And they had three proposals they made, but the one that really attracted me was the research project that they wanted to pursue on the compound house, which is an African typology. And it was intended as a way to critique Eurocentric perspective on architecture, and also to look at the compound house as the African typology that resisted colonization, that continues to exist within a colonized space. And so we started this project, and the project was what really, I think, started to speak without me saying anything or doing anything. But the project itself started to gain attention. It was very successful. We were all quite, there's a lot of work to be done, but it's an exciting project. And we were then we participated in the 100-day studios to present that project. And then the involvement with Architecture Foundation has brought us on the platform with Black female architects as well. And we were part of the panel that talked about race and modern architecture. So it's growing. So it's growing from the ground up, I would say. I think that's what I would suggest, is that, you know, it's about taking action, and it's really up to each one of us to look at ourselves. And I'm talking to white people, is that we do have to look at ourselves and question where we are, and to bring awareness, we have to unlearn and we have to learn. And we will never, I mean, the message was very clear in what I've presented today, is we can never know or understand what it is to be non-white, but we can try. And that's all I would expect. The action is for us to try, and it will be a never-ending effort. It's not an effort that you tick a box and then it's done. It's an effort that's for the whole duration of our lives. If we're going to change anything, it has to be continuous and every day, faced with every day. I hope that answered. It was a long answer.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mary. I think
we have a long way to go. We have a very long way to go, but you know, and every day I try to take a step forward with it.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, and as we're trying to do in the Architecture Fringes, it's all a big ongoing process, and this is just the very kind of point of departure of this process. It's not a question, but somebody is asking if you can share the 8 identities list on here. And I have a question from within the team. So they're saying, in architecture, do you think we often feel good about ourselves on very narrow terms? And how can we broaden these terms and expand that conversation?
Can you be a little more explicit when you say terms?
So this is from Neil within the team. So I don't know if Neil, I'm going to call you out.
Yeah, it was a reference really to the Obama quote about Obama possibly in a sort of an American political context, allowing people to feel good about themselves, but actually within quite narrow parameters. And I suppose it kind of connects, because we often sort of talk about or think about architecture as a progressive practice, and yeah, just about whether you think there's ways of sort of broadening the terms. I suppose it's really connects back to what you were talking about at the start.
Yeah, I think with the Obama thing, I mean, I put these videos very deliberately in the order that they were, and I don't know if anyone even noticed the links between the videos with certain words that were being used, even though they're completely disparate narratives told by completely different people. Which to me is what sort of starts to speak. And with Obama, for me, it spoke back to what the previous video talked about, which is that I have to behave like you in order to be accepted. You know, so he was symbolic. He was a symbol of the kind of Black person that white people want to see, that looks like them and behaves like them. And that's why he could never talk about racism, because if he ever dared to bring that word up, then he wasn't behaving like a white person anymore. So it isn't just about symbolism. I think it's even more than that. It goes much deeper. And he knows it, right? He knew it. His wife knew it. The whole family knew it. They had to always present this perfect image that suited the white perspective. Well-educated, Harvard University, the top of the Ivy League schools. You know, he could tick all the boxes that fit in what the white wants to see, and it's not authentic. It's not authentic. It's not who he is. But he couldn't be himself. And I think this is what we have to realize and open up to. And Robin DiAngelo talked about fish out of water. And then Sonia Renee Taylor talks about being a fish in the ocean. I think it's a really good analogy, is that when you're swimming in an ocean and you're at home in the ocean, you don't know what it's like. You don't understand. And until you get to the edge where it gets rough. And this is when you're really starting to confront the issues, to confront who you are, because you're being removed, or at least being pushed to the edge where you can start to look at yourself more clearly. Because when you're in it, you can't see. And architecture, to me, there's something particular to architecture that builds on the ego. And this idea of individualism, because we put a name to a building, but we all know that it's not one person who contributed to that building. It's not one person who designed it. It's a collective endeavor. It's never been one person, never. But we're taught to believe that we are as architects. Fountainhead, we're the saviors. We're saving the world. We're creating a better future. Our ego is so built up that we don't know oftentimes, and students struggle with that too. When we do group work, it's a struggle. They don't like it. It's that individualism, and and it builds on that ego. And I think until we start tackling that, we're not anywhere close to what we need to do in architecture. I hope that.
Thank you. Yeah, that I think that the connection structurally there to the sort of ego and the individual, I think is really an interesting one, like for future discussions for sure. Thank you.
We've got a question from Andy White. Andy, I don't know if you want to ask this question yourself.
I can just unmute. Yeah. Yeah, it's just a kind of, hopefully not off topic. Maybe I'm a bit optimistic, but I was going to say, is it ever possible to just manage to make the leap and be colorblind in our dealings and just treat people as fellow human beings? Or do you think that we always need to have this consciousness?
We're not the same, right?
I agree. I think we should actually celebrate the fact that we're not all the same, but at the same time, we are all equal. We are different but equal, if that makes sense to you. So yeah, do you think we have to always have this consciousness? I know it's maybe an optimistic way of thinking, and I think to some extent we do.
I don't actually see it. I don't actually see it as optimistic. I actually see it as dangerous. I see it as dangerous because it's part of the problem. And that's what the first video was talking about. And what I really touches me and grabs me every time I've watched that video is the pain and the emotion that Black person is feeling, that is feeling every single day of his life. Every single day. And as a white person, we are not conscious of that because we don't have to. So to say colorblind, to say I don't see you as Black, I see you as human. He explained it in that video. When you say that as a white person, what I hear is that you want me to be like you. You want me to pretend I'm white. You want me to eat your food. You want to be like you. And I
think the example you gave of Obama being like a white person is a good example, because actually he committed racist acts himself. He became a racist because he thought it was okay to conduct illegal wars, killing Muslim women and children. It's external to the state, but it's still a form of racism when you go to somebody else's country and you kill them because they're a different religion.
Yeah, I would be very careful about what you're saying, because it's coming from a place where you don't understand.
Possibly, I don't pretend to understand everything. It's just racism cuts in a lot of different ways, but I think particularly actual bombs falling on people is, you know, the worst kind of racism.
And you're putting that on one black person, one black man as his responsibility. I really don't think that.
I do and I don't. I do and I don't. It's a system. It's a racist system in America and to some extent in Britain, and it's very difficult.
Not to some extent.
I feel bad bringing that up because I think he had the very, very good intentions when he became the president, and I think the system changed those intentions for the worse. You know, if that makes sense.
The system is constructed by people. And the system is constructed by white people.
Yes, yes.
So
he fitted into a system that caused.
Well, let's not look at Obama as an individual that is responsible for that. I think we have to be.
I wouldn't reply to that because it's too contentious. It's too contentious. But I would agree with Noam Chomsky's analysis of recent American presidents.
We have Nana wanting to respond to, you're on mute at the moment, to Andy's question.
Yeah, can I, I'm actually quite shocked. I think that those comments are, sorry, it's actually quite, yeah. Can I just say, I think when people ask the question, is it possible to be colorblind? I always want to make the comment that I didn't know I was Black until I moved to this country. So I don't have the option to pick whether people see my color or not. And that idea that you can be colorblind is so, it is so fundamentally violent that it's not understood how violent it really is. And then I think to the point of Obama, I am not an Obama apologist. I think that the man, you know, he has a lot of criticism to respond to, but I think that to kind of marginalize his legacy is not a kind of American militarized complex is so dangerous and so profoundly upsetting that I'm sorry, I find that incredibly, not the critique of Obama, but the idea that it's not understood and read in a kind of industrialized militarization of America that produces this kind of violence. And I don't understand the fact that it's not even constructed as, Obama's identity is so complex. He is not an African-American president. His mother's white and his father's African. That was never even brought up. You know, the fact that half his family is Muslim, all those complexities are erased completely by this flattening of a man is African-American, and that was his only identity. Nobody thought about the fact that he was African, not African-American. He is also half white. Where is all that complexity in who he is that is just negated? And then I don't know, Andy, I don't want to come across.
I agree with what you've just said. I
don't want to come across as overly emotional, but I just think that it just needs to.
It's a provocation. I've been provoked. You've been provoked. I don't think.
But
I really don't want to upset anybody, but I think it's not a bad thing sometimes if the discussion moves kind of up a level that we actually press each other's buttons a little bit. Apologize if I'm.
But what is that trying to? What is that trying to instigate here? Where is that?
Because I need to learn. I need to find out things. I need to find out how you feel. I need to understand what your opinion is and listen to it. And I just listen to what you said, and I don't disagree with that. Everything is oversimplified, and I don't disagree with what you just said about Obama.
It's not oversimplified. I think it's this kind of. It comes from a place of privilege to ask that question, and I just think that it's just. I don't mind having a discussion, but I hope it is understood the place of privilege it comes from. I planned on completely staying silent in this conversation, but I just found that, I'm sorry, I couldn't go unchallenged. I just think that it's and the grading of systems of violence, you know, one
I don't
does,
think we should do that. I don't think we should say one thing is worse than another and so on and so on. I think it's a dangerous thing to do.
Can I interject? I think part of, well, first there was the discussion of colorblind, and I think that's extremely problematic because of the complexities. But the other thing that I would caution is that it's so much easier to blame someone else. So the focus on America as if it's an American problem is also problematic. And tonight, I'm hoping tonight it's about looking at ourselves, and it's not about pointing the finger somewhere else. Because if we're going to unlearn, it has to start with ourselves. And as long as we're finding blame elsewhere, as long as we're pointing fingers somewhere else, it's deferring from the issue. And that's what I find difficult with your comments when you start to talk about America and the politics in America. Because the discussion here is really about whiteness, and it's about looking at ourselves. So, you know, for me, that's really the provocation. And so if we want to talk about colorblindness, that to me, I think came from you, and you trying to understand that. And I think that we can discuss. And I think for me, I can say, even for me as a woman, when men say, I don't see you as a woman, that I am blind to that you're a human being to me, that's bullshit. I'm a woman. You know, I have big breasts and I have big hips, and it's quite clear, and I'm proud of my body. And I you know, and I should be able to celebrate that and be acknowledged for it. And I think, you know, if for a Black person, they know they're Black, they love their Black, you know, not everyone, but, you know, they struggle with it, but they, you know, they own it. That's theirs to own. And when you say colorblind, it just, it's that same idea of the first video talking about humanity, like, you know, because I'm white, I'm human. And it's based on this whole, the Western philosophy of individualism. And they think that everybody has that right. We think as white people that everybody has the same right to be individual. But it's not, it isn't, it doesn't exist. It's a delusion.
I agree with a lot of what you're saying.
So I think we're going to take one more question, one short question from Alon Elisa.
No, my name is Alona. It's not Alona.
Oh, right. Okay.
That's hi, Mary. Good to see you. Hola. Guapa, ¿cómo estás?
Hola.
It's good to see Mary. So I'm just gonna, I think it's quite thought-provoking what Mary has shown us. And I've known Mary for a while because she hired me for a job, you know, in England. And I was in England for a long time. I'm half Italian, half Basque. I'm born in London. And I think the question of race is important. It's not just about re-education, but, you know, I think it's important we have an open debate about racism as a whole, because we're looking at America, right? I mean, this bastard, as I call the Trump guy, you know, who's left, built a wall to stop Latinos coming to America. He stopped Muslims to coming to America. He undermined everybody, right? But the bottom line, I think, which adds to my question is, a few weeks ago, we were having this kind of debate about racism in the UK and in the profession, right? And I worked about 15 years ago in a firm in Glasgow where my boss happened to be Black, yeah, you know, and there was, we've never met, and I was speaking this with a friend of mine which worked for, not in the same projects, and we said the profession in Scotland is very white, you know, and we started talking about it in an open way. Because Richard MacDonald, this guy, was the only Black architect I ever worked in the UK in all the years I worked as an architect. And he starts saying that when he was in his football team and he was in architecture school, he had to suffer that, you know, he couldn't be seen as a Black man being an architect, you know? And we started talking about this kind of interesting conversation on the chat. And I said to him, you know, racism happens in this country in many ways. And I said, I know how you feel. And he said, Alona, you don't know how you feel because you're white. And I said, well, one time I was with my boy because, you know, I've got an 8-year-old. I was taking the booster in Plymouth where I work, and a car ran me over nearly. And I went around to the woman and said, what's going on? And she said, you bloody foreigner, go home. I didn't even open my mouth, you know, and I confronted her. And then when the police came over, the police officer said, oof, you were very brave to confront her, because we have so many racist attacks every day in Plymouth against gay people, against disabled people. And I said, bloody hell, you know, I said, how is this possible in the modern age? And she said, well, you were lucky you were not attacked. And I'm like, bloody hell, this happened to me as a white European woman in the pre-Brexit era. So how does every day a Black architect feel working in Scotland? And I'm a Scottish chartered, you know, because I studied in Edinburgh and I lived in Edinburgh for a long time. And I feel as Scottish as anybody else, as much as I feel any British as anybody else. But what worries me, Mary, from the presentation you mentioned, is the fact that, you know, Trumpism came in America as a result of Obama, which, you know, as your colleague mentioned, his mother was as white as me, really, you know, his father was African from Kenya. But the reality of the UK, and what concerns me, is that what we are seeing with Brexit and the kind of racist approach above anything that is different, and how this great colonial Britain is coming the post-Brexit era in a great way, covered by COVID, because everybody's at home, so there's no meetings in the street and stuff. Aren't we really replicating the Trumpism that we've seen in America, the images of the 6th of January, right, which I was in Spain, you know, and in the UK, and passing legislation that is even worse, because at the end of the day, the European Union, something that did for this country is put very heavy legislation on equality, you know, equality, because the legislation has to be harder. I mean, to me, it's like, I've seen it in Belfast between Catholic and Protestants, but I've never seen such a society, and Mary, forgive me for being so straight because I'm to the point, as racist in the way, as impossible as whiteness. I mean, I was yet today giving a reference to an African colleague, Teboho, which Mary knows, which wants to do a course in Oxford. And when I went to look at the department, everybody was white. You know? I was just like, you know, nothing against anybody here, because, you know, we all have to have diversity of people, but we have to have an honest debate about race in architecture. And the debate has to go beyond color only. It has to be about re-educating ourselves fundamentally, and put ourselves in a position that it doesn't mean by me thinking, you know, how one of my Black African students of PhD is feeling every day in England, because I feel we need to have that conversation. She needs to tell me how, you know, every time people question her English, right? So it makes me rethink that when I'm correcting her script for her PhD, I don't want her to think that I'm telling her her English is not that good, you know, because it's her third language. So we need to have a much more honest debate in the profession, because the profession hasn't done enough and is not doing enough in my view, right? And I think this has to be really an open debate throughout. And it's kind of interesting because we look at Mary, and this is what I was saying to my son, because Mary knows my son. You look at Mary and Mary looks to you as white, right? You know, comes across white American, her accent. But Mary is actually African. And, you know, I had this debate with other African friends like John and Louis, and they said, Mary is more African than me, right? And I remember being with Mary in South Africa, speaking with other people from her country, you know, and you couldn't make a difference. So,
Well, I have to, yes, I mean, I hear this a lot, but I have to be also authentic about, you know, my own experiences. So having grown up as the only white kid besides my siblings in an all-Black school, and this was during apartheid, so racism was
there, yeah,
was the norm. It was accepted. Is that I grew up hating my skin because of my skin, I never felt I belonged. I wasn't one of everybody else. I was the odd one out. However, I always knew and was always reminded every day that I was in a privileged position.
This is true, Mary, and I think, yeah.
So I have to, you know, this is something I have to work out for myself, is my own privilege, because I am in a world where whiteness has privilege. And for several years, I would say, living in Paris, you know, I struggle with it. I'm reminded of it all the time because my children are also mixed. So So because of that, I'm always in this world every day being reminded of the problem of race, right?
But we need to change, Mary. I mean, it needs to change. It requires action. It's not enough, you know. People say to me when the gentleman was breathing for his life in America in the summer, you know, and I watched it and it was terrible. I've got an 8-year-old and I asked his father, can I play it? And I played, and then I put Martin Luther King speech. And I said, Alberto, I want you to listen with an 8-year-old attention span. And if an 8-year-old child can bloody understand that that is wrong, yeah, anybody can. And I think we need to educate, people need to be educated, people need to have a debate. And the only way we can change is by starting somewhere. And it requires action. I mean, the fact that we think talk is good, but we require action, you know, because for me, it's exactly why I spoke to my friend Leanne, which is from Edinburgh, that in a profession we're working for 15 years across probably hundreds of people in Edinburgh, because I trained in Edinburgh and worked there for a long time. And we only saw one Black architect that was just actually mixed race Scottish. Something has to give, you know, something has to change, Mary. And, you know, it's relevant. And I think what you put through, it makes us think as a way to question our self-belief system and to question that system that needs changing. Because structural racism, by defining the word of structural racism, you have to change the structure. You have to take action against that structure to change something. I mean, that's my firm belief, you know, but then I speak my mind. I mean, Mary, you know me. I mean, I'm not gonna pretend that I don't agree with you, because I do. And I think it's, you know, it's good that you can really use this platform. I mean, I found about this debate through being a Scottish trained and a Scottish raised through the RIAs. And I thought, hey ho, great, Mary's coming to Edinburgh, you know, to Scotland to talk about something interesting. But I didn't think it was going to be that interesting, Mary. I have to say, your work has moved beyond quite great stuff, you know, and it's great to see you. I haven't seen you for a while, but you know.
I'd like to give, if there's anyone else, I guess.
Any questions, Mary, but good stuff.
Yeah, I'm conscious of the time. So I guess for me, moving forward, I don't know, are we having more questions?
I think we've got a good discussion, animated discussion going on. So I think we could probably take another question. Adam Coleman has asked a question. I don't know if you want to ask it yourself.
Yes, hello. I just reminded myself what I said and where it came from. Yeah, I suppose I work in an institution, and I wonder what change looks like and how it manifests and when you know it's happening. And I wondered, from your perspective, are you seeing change happening in particular places? And linked to that is a recognition that many, if not all, institutions are white-led. What is meaningful leadership in those contexts that doesn't just further the position and the ego of the white, probably man?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think an important one. And I think what it's going to take is educating ourselves. I think first you have to understand the issue, and it may have to take really looking at the history of the construction of racism, how the whole concept of, you know, race was constructed in order to understand it historically. But then within the space where you're working, once you you start to understand the issues, once you become aware, is being willing to call out your colleagues. Because you have to learn to understand concepts of microaggression, you know, concepts of anti-racism. What does that mean? You know, and I think with that understanding, you'll start to notice, you know, the ways people are behaving. You'll start to notice the things that are being done that are inappropriate, decisions that are being made that you know from your awareness is not the right way to go. You know, for in your institution, for example, if they bring a person of color to talk about racism, you now know that's actually putting an extra burden on them, because they should not be the one educating you. So it's really about making the effort to search and try to understand. Those videos made it clear you will never understand, right? But the effort and the trying to understand and then calling out your colleagues and having those hard and difficult conversations. But it's really about that. It's about the transparency, the openness, the authenticity. I really believe one of the things we have learned from the pandemic, the blessings of the pandemic, not the harsh side of it, but what the opportunity that has come out of that is that we've been isolated, we've been forced to look at ourselves. This is the moment to really spend time with yourself and asking yourself, you know, where, that's why I like that column, you know, ask yourself, where are you on that column? You know, and how far down do you want to go? I love that the supremacy is at the top and the abolitionist is at the bottom. And this is why I think the real work that's happening is on the ground. And it will, you know, there will be opportunity to change the top, but as long as we have a top-down structure, I don't see how that's possible. I really don't believe in a top-down structure, and our institutions, the Western world structure of management of institutions has always been top-down, and that's part of the problem. So yeah, it's an effort on each of us individually. Now that you've become aware, is that you make the effort. You make the effort to unlearn and to learn, and it will never end. But you will see the improvements. You will start to see where things are changing. It will change as long as everyone is working towards them. It'll change. I have hope.
Okay, so we're going to have a very final question. I keep saying that, but there's a question from Amy Peacock, and I think it leads on from what Adam asked. Okay. Amy?
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to ask maybe if there's something more that we could do in architectural education, because a lot of the theory that we learn from is historically white. What can we do to stop whiteness from reasserting itself as we move forward? So,
Amy, you're going to be very pleased to know that I was prepared for that question today. Because it's the question, I'm of course in architectural education myself. So it's actually what I found that I thought would be good for everyone to see. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly and show you these slides that came from students. So this is a student-led project called Decolonizing Architecture, and it's from University of Bath. And I thought the list of proposals they've made on what you can do, what action you can take in architectural education, I found quite comprehensive. So let me just share really quickly. So this is the main, so they're giving here action points for an equal education. Teaching globally. And you can find this on Instagram. So they have this is where I got this from. So their IG is Decolonizing Architecture. Encourage social projects. I think this is really, really important. Because when you encourage social projects, it starts to allow conversations where everyone can contribute. It's much more difficult when the conversation is focused on a Eurocentric canons of the definition of architecture that tends to stay in the realm of aesthetics and you know, tectonics, things that are removed from human experience, right? From discussing culture, from discussing differences in social inequalities. So I think it's really important to bring that in. The multidisciplinarity of architecture as well. Engaging educational boards to develop more global views. Context. I think this one is really important as well, and this is what the book on race and modern architecture does, is that it shows sort of the shadow or the dark side of European architecture and its history. We tend to teach only the good side. We tend to teach the things we celebrate about architecture, but I think we need to show both sides. So the wars, for example, colonization, slavery, all those things need to be as visible so that there is a more comprehensive understanding of the history of architecture. Making reporting tools known, feedback, getting students involved. We're working on a project at our school that Nana is leading, actually, on looking at these issues of inequality. Rethinking recruitment. So we are responsible for someone like in my position. This is something I'm trying to do, is to diversify the staff. Because we have, in fact, at Kingston, 70%, around 60 some students at entry level who are non-white. And the staff demographics are certainly not reflecting that. So we're far from being anywhere close to a balance. And I think, role models are really important for young people, and we need to be able to provide those role models. Resources. So this is something else that we need to develop and work on, is developing a better collection of resources and references. And actively advertising wider. So that's just what I thought was useful to share today, but I think it really is about trying to shift the lens a little. So it isn't just about widening, but it's also about shifting lenses and hearing from different perspectives. Because we all, this is the other thing, architecture sees itself as this, as a discipline that sometimes removes itself from human experiences. Every student who enters into architecture experiences architecture every day. We all live in buildings. So we need to be much more inclusive about allowing students to talk about their experiences and to contribute to a discussion of architecture in a more personal way. This is one of the arguments that Bell Hooks makes about the Western philosophy of dualism that separated the mind from the body, so that in education, we require the student, when they enter the classroom, to leave their body behind. Philosophy is now arguing that, in fact, we've never been modern. You can never separate the mind from the body. We are embodied beings. And so we should be able to talk about experiences and feelings in a learning environment, and not create this space that tries to be so objective that we distance ourselves from it. So I think that kind of discussion that allows students to be able to be much more personal about what they're doing and to bring their own personal experiences to what they're doing will change the atmosphere in education. So I hope that answered a little bit the question.
Great, thank you, Mary, and thanks for a great presentation. And thanks for provoking and responding to such a great discussion afterwards.
Thank you.
I think we have a lot to think about, and as we know for the Architecture Fringe, this is the start of a very long process of unlearning. So yeah, thank you again from everyone.
And it'd be great. I'm happy to give references. I think there were some already given in the chat, but it'd be great to start also developing references that we can all look to, so we can learn more and try to understand the situation better, so we know how to move forward, and how to ask the right questions, how to take actions.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
great.
you
We'll
so
make
much.
note of all this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciated this.
Thank you, Mary.
Yeah.
Great. And I'm going to hand over to Shona, who's going to introduce the breakout room section.
Thanks, Lisa, and thank you, Mary, again for your provocation. Apologies for the overrun this evening. However, I'm sure you would all agree.
Sorry, guys.
No, I think the discussion and reflection on Mary's provocation was essential. We will close the event closer to 9 o'clock now, though. I hope that's okay for everyone. But we're now moving into the breakout rooms. So I believe that we're all going to be put off into different breakout rooms. Some people maybe have already said what they maybe want to discuss, so it might be project ideas or venues or funding or collaborations. We'll be there for about 20 minutes. So I think we'll be back in this main space around 8:45. You can move around between the breakout rooms, but I guess just try to be aware of numbers. We don't want too many people in one room because then not everybody gets a chance to speak. So I think Raina's gonna.
Hi everyone. Hope you had some interesting discussions through the breakout rooms. It was quite some provocative discussions after a provocative talk. What we usually do now is we kind of summarize what have been said in each of the breakout rooms. So I don't know, I could start and then everyone can say what happened to the room. So in my room, Andy White, an architect, had this idea of a debate event. He was a bit concerned, but basically his idea is about debating two emerging issues or topics, especially under the unlearning theme of this year's topic in architecture. We also had in the breakout room Kirsten Body from Inverness. She had already had some experience with the Architecture Fringe in the past, and basically their idea, she's part of an artist collective, and their idea is about a walk, like a historic walk describing hidden histories in Inverness. Cyrene Taylor, located in Glasgow, she has an idea of regenerate Govan Hill and through an outdoor cinema space, which can become also a platform for the Architecture Fringe and probably other events as well. And we also have Julia, who just popped in the discussion to see what we're doing and maybe have some thoughts in the future. So that's from my breakout room.
Will I go next? So my breakout room was fairly small. It was just myself, Nana, and Joanna. So neither Nana nor Joanna have done anything on ArchFringe before, so it was more just about a bit of an overview of all the information there. So you see Andy's already shared Padlet in the chat. If you go to our website, which I'm sure a few of you have already done, just send that on the chat there. There's lots of information there about our open call and links to the Padlet there too. So that's what we were sort of talking through. Joanna was quite keen to get some students involved from Kingston, so she's going to spread the word down there. So I think that's my quick summary.
I guess I'll summarise ours. Yeah, in our breakup room there was Indy, Akiko, and Aoife, and it was kind of just a general discussion. Really, it was just discussing further what's been the provocation from tonight. Indy brought up statistics published about how many BAME people start an architecture degree and how each stage, part 1, part 2, part 3, you see less and less people coming through. And we were also speaking of ISM Magazine's plans for the future and Indy's plans to collaborate with them, possibly.
So that's me.
I'll just quickly summarize our group. I was with David, Thierry and Shawnee. And yeah, we had quite a sort of wide-ranging discussion, not about any specific projects, but we touched on land. And David mentioned some excellent events that are coming up at CEDA, Scottish Environmental Design Association, are running in March, and David has just posted the links in the chat actually, which is excellent. So really interesting sort of discussion around the relationship between power and land and architecture and the built environment. Shawnee mentioned a project that they've been working on called the Pluriversity, which is about challenging colonialism sort of in the university. I might have misrepresented that possibly slightly, but which I apologize for, but it sounds like a fascinating project and hopefully something that we can hear more about through the Fringe. They also provided some really interesting reference points, which I've just posted in the chat as well for their project. So maybe those are things that we can add to the Padlet as well. And yeah, it was a really sort of nice discussion and a nice way to reflect on the provocation from earlier as well.
Okay, and my group, I had Bex, Hilary, LSR, Adam and Mary. Thank you for hanging with us, Mary. Hilary was exploring or reflecting on the recent listing of 8 post-war tower blocks in Aberdeen and what that might mean in terms of unlearning for lots of things, architectural, social, who makes these decisions. So that was something to reflect on. Adam is looking at something in Thurso, in terms of Thurso is always a historic place, but was recast as a settlement adjacent to the nuclear power station, which is being decommissioned currently from a crofting community to basically a nuclear town, and exploring perhaps the unlearning of the changing shifts in that town. Bex and Mary gave us some feedback on those, and Alisar was exploring some more logistic support for ISM, the student magazine from Strathclyde, for the summer. So yeah, it was really interesting. And just to say what Shona had mentioned was that the Padlet, which I posted up in the chat there, we've always kind of sought to explore how we can help open program contributors meet other people. Obviously, we're not in physical spaces, and actually it's a bit liberating because we normally have the open meetups in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Inverness, but being online, it's actually a little bit more accessible for everybody across the country. But we would hope that the Padlet is something of interest. You can maybe lodge your project essentially, and people within the Padlet can give you some feedback and some help. It's a way to try and make some connections. So we do encourage you to use that. As Shona said, the open call will be launching on the 27th of January. And that is slightly different this year. If you've taken part in the Architecture Fringe before, we have some funding from Creative Scotland to develop a new web platform. So the old website will be changing in a month or two, but the open call will be actually a registration system first, where from the 27th, if you register with the platform with your project, that is then an online space for you to develop your project online. We will have some milestones and deadlines as the open call closure approaches in early April. But that will be your own online spaces to build your contribution to the open program as you go. And we'll be issuing some guidance about what information you need. But as Shona said, on the website currently, we kind of take you through what you need for public facing programming and imagery and things like that. So we'll give you more information and guidance on the 27th as the open call launches. We're pretty excited for that. But yes, if you would like to try and use the Padlet, that's new for us, and hopefully that is some help as a way of trying to come together to develop our work. I hand back to Shona.
I guess is that us? Or are we concluding?
Does anybody have any questions or any thoughts? I mean, do feel free to email the Architecture Fringe if you need some more help. We're always there to try and reply to you, and we can try and arrange some conversations if that's helpful as well. But I guess it's a wonderful provocation tonight from Mary. We really appreciate that. I think it's essential, as Shona mentioned earlier. But does anybody have any final reflections or questions? Like Kirsten's online claps, because that's quite hard. She'll do a clap for me while she's here. But thank you so much for everyone for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We'll be back in February. The last meetup will be in March, but we'll be back next month with another provocation. Thank you for joining us. We really do appreciate it. It's always great to get a feel for how the open programme is emerging. We'll try and release a little bit more information on the core programme shortly as we go. We're just in for some funding with Creative Scotland for that. But thank you, Mary. We really appreciate you hanging out.
My pleasure. No, I've really enjoyed getting to know your organization and the work you're doing. So wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. If you're up for joining us again this summer for an event, we'd be ecstatic for that.
I would love that. I would love that. Yeah. No, thank you.
That's super. That's great. Well, everyone, happy Thursday. I hope you're all doing well. And thanks again for joining us. And yeah, we'll see you next month, hopefully.
Just a final reminder. I don't know if you know, we have launched our Patreon page a few weeks ago. So we will most appreciate if you just, visit the page, see our goals, and we outline what we're doing. And if you feel consider supporting us, we would much appreciate. But that's it.
We are worst advertisers, so
yeah. But
yeah, perfect support so far. So if you feel like giving us a hand as we try and build an organisation with some staff, because we're also volunteers here, please feel free to have a look at that. There's lots of different levels of support. But thanks for reminding Matt. But yeah, thanks so much for everybody. We'll see you next month.
Yeah. See you next month. Bye.
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 Bye.